The United Nations says the Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria and surrounding nations has led to the deaths of almost 4,000 children in the past 4 years. The UN's Special Representative for Children and Armed Conflict said the militants had inflicted unspeakable horror on young people in the northeast part of the country. CGTN's Nick Harper has more from New York.
This United Nations report, focusing on Boko Haram's campaign of violence and its impact on children, is the first of its kind. It examined a more than 3-year period between 2013 and last year, looking predominantly at northeast Nigeria, but also including the neighbouring countries of Cameroon, Chad and Niger. The United Nations Secretary-General's Special Representative for Children and Armed Conflict, Virginia Gamba, said Boko Haram had used tactics including recruitment, abductions, sexual violence and attacks on schools to cause, she said, unspeakable horror on children in the region. The report also found an increasing use of children in suicide attacks, with investigators documenting 90 children used. The majority of them were girls. In total, the UN recorded 3,900 deaths and more than 7,000 people under the age of 18 who were maimed. The United Nations verified the recruitment and use of 1,650 children. Many of them had been abducted, but others joined up, and in some cases, parents were forced to hand over their children in return for promises of security or simply in return for money. Boko Haram has deliberately targeted schools, with the United Nations estimating that the militants have destroyed around 1,500 since 2014. Last month was the 3rd anniversary of Boko Haram's abduction of the schoolgirls from the Nigerian town of Chibok. Nearly 200 of them remain missing. The United Nations is now urging all parties, Boko Haram and government forces, to abide by international humanitarian and human rights standards. Nick Harper, CGTN, New York.
Right, let's get more details and insights on those stories from CGTN's Deji Badmas, who now joins us live with the latest from Lagos, Nigeria. Deji, going back to that earlier story, what more do we know about the kidnapping threats on foreign nationals as announced by the US and UK authorities, and how is it being viewed in Nigeria?
Well, not in any way surprising at all. That's the way it's been viewed in Nigeria. And of course, what we're learning is that the report has been confirmed to be credible. The Nigerian government has not said anything at all. We haven't heard anything at all from the military. What we do know is that the Banki axis of Borno State is actually somewhat volatile. We've seen, for instance, in Bama local government area in the past, sometime last year, where aid workers actually came under attack while they were being escorted by a military convoy. And around the Banki axis, we've seen on a number of occasions where military convoys have come under a surprising attack now from the Boko Haram militants. And around that area in Banki, you have a huge displaced persons camp that has about 32,000 displaced persons. So it's actually a very important area, very important, and you have a number of humanitarian and aid workers working, foreign aid workers now working around that region. So, I mean, this threat, no doubt, will definitely make things difficult and make things difficult, especially for the displaced persons there, because if these aid workers find it difficult to be able to carry out their work there, then life will become even much more difficult for the displaced persons there. But we're waiting to hear what the military would say and how the government would respond to this.
And Deji, going back to the story of the UN report on the plight of children affected by the Boko Haram insurgency, it does seem to paint a grim report. Do we at this time know what number of children are still being held by the insurgents?
You're absolutely right. I mean, it paints a very grim picture of what we all know has always been a very bad situation, because what we do know is that the people who have been most affected by this Boko Haram insurgency would be women and children. And we do not know the number that number of children now that Boko Haram might be holding, but there certainly would be in their hundreds. And We also have to consider the fact that Boko Haram is now split in two. So, and we know that both factions have a number of children. We have seen that almost all of the suicide bombings we have seen lately, as a matter of fact, from last year to this period, have been carried out by children. So no doubt at all that Boko Haram has a number of children it is holding, and unfortunately using some of them as suicide bombers. But it's difficult to tell the actual number now. But certainly, as I said, there would be in the hundreds.
And finally, Deji, obviously that report not mincing words, using the phrase unspeakable horror on young people. What can you tell us is being done to help rehabilitate the children affected by the insurgency so far?
Well, what the government has done is the Borno State government now actually has a rehabilitation and reintegration center. Now, this rehabilitation and reintegration center is where the state government actually carries out the rehabilitation and reintegration program for those who have been freed by the military. What usually happens is that the military goes into a community, for instance, liberate that community, and then free the people who had been captured by Boko Haram. What the military does is, after carrying out a debriefing on this, especially women and children now, the people who were kidnapped, they're usually handed over to the Borno State government. The Borno State government actually has a center, like a camp, where these children, the women and children, are kept. They are de-radicalized. There's a comprehensive de-radicalization program where they are put through. The children, of course, are well fed. The government takes care of them, and after a while, they are now reintegrated into their society. That's exactly what has been happening, and we know that that is continuing as we speak. So that is exactly what's in place, I mean, by the Borno State government, because the program is actually being handled by the Borno State government, of course, with the support of the federal government in terms of funding and what have you.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Deji, thank you very much for those insights. CGTN's Deji Badmus joining us live there from Lagos, Nigeria.